To turn to the Stand Your Ground shooting case that ignited a national debate. Today would have been Trayvon Martin's 18th birthday. He was, of course, the unarmed teenager who was shot last year in a confrontation with George Zimmerman. Zimmerman was in court today, where a judge denied his attorney's request to delay this summer's murder trial. And joining me now exclusively is George Zimmerman's brother, Robert Zimmerman Jr. Robert, welcome back.
Thanks for having me again, Piers.
What is your reaction to what happened today?
I want to start tonight, Piers, by speaking, if I can, for a moment, about the importance of the significance of this date. Today would have been Trayvon Martin's 18th birthday. I know that today, just as George's attorney expressed in court, Trayvon Martin's family has a very special burden to carry, and I want them to know that that's not absent from our mind now, and it never has been, regardless of any circumstances that surrounded that night, February 26. I know that today is an especially trying time for all of them. So I want to start out tonight by saying that. I also want to start out right away by letting the world know and America know that disparaging the memory of Trayvon Martin in any way, shape, or form is unacceptable. It's not necessary. It doesn't contribute in a positive way to the outcome of this case of justice, and our family won't stand for it. But as for how I feel about court specifically, obviously I would support Mark's arguments that he made in court. I agree with him wholeheartedly. I'm a little disappointed by what happened, but I know that Mark O'Meara is going to turn...
Right, Mark O'Meara is the attorney for your brother, just to clarify that.
Correct, yes, and I think he made very compelling arguments both in writing in his motion and today when he readdressed the court after Mr. Della Rianda. But I think that Mark is going to turn every stone. We've always had confidence in him to zealously represent George's interests. And if trial will go forth June 10th, as it's on the schedule now, then it will be a prepared attorney that represents my brother. We all want closure in this case, but we do want George to get a fair trial.
I mean, what it is going to be now, it clearly, is a kind of national examination of the Stand Your Ground law. At least 19 states have a version of this. What is your view about the longevity of Stand Your Ground as a law in America, in any state after this case?
I think that there's two things that come to mind immediately. Number one is I'm glad that it is brought to the forefront of people's minds. It's about half the country, roughly, that has these kinds of laws or laws similar. What makes Florida's special is that Florida exonerates you from civil liability when you are found to be exonerated from criminal prosecution or liability by a judge. That means that if you are in a situation where a judge finds that you should not be tried by a jury because there's overwhelming evidence to support your innocence in a situation where you defended yourself, you're not dragged through the civil courts for years and years and years. The other thing is that I think that it should be in this gun debate very relevant to people who own guns or carry guns, who might not have found themselves in George's situation, to now have at the forefront of their minds the reality of what can happen when you are armed. Whether your weapon is concealed or whether your weapon is carried openly, like they are in open carry states, the reality is that we need to become more familiar with the laws that govern our states and how that varies from state to state and what could happen to us if we're in a similar situation.
Well, I'm going to come back to you after the break, and we're going to talk about the gun proposals for gun control. I know you've got strong views about this. You don't agree with most of it, and I want to find out why after the break.
Sure.
I'm back with us exclusively is Robert Zimmerman Jr., the brother of the man who shot Trayvon Martin. So, Robert, let's talk about gun control. You've seen the president's measures that he wants to put forward, over 30 of them. You, I believe, object to any assault weapons ban. Explain to me why.
Piers, what I object to is the government doing, enacting these bans and speaking to all of America, all 50 states, as if some kind of broad brush measure is going to address every situation in every state. You've brought up Connecticut many times where assault rifles like an AR-15 were banned. The reality is criminals don't care about
bans. They weren't. That's the point. AR-15s are not banned in Connecticut. Even though
criminals don't...
Well, here's my point. Even though Connecticut has the 5th strongest gun control in America, the AR-15 was not banned. Now, I want to show you a bit of footage from last night when I was in Texas of me firing an AR-15. Let's watch this.
Great.
Here's the thing. As I began to fire it, I thought, OK, well, this is the speed it fires. And then I got into the rhythm with the trigger, and suddenly it began pumping out these bullets at this extraordinary rate and power. And all I could think of, I'll be honest with you, Robert, was what on earth did those poor kids at Sandy Hook have to go through? They each was hit by 3 to 11 bullets. And then I thought about the movie theatre in Aurora, where they used, the shooter there, Holmes, used an AR-15 with a 100-bullet magazine and unleashed it in under a minute. And I thought, what on earth are these weapons doing in civilian hands? And what is your answer?
Right, that's to your point, Piers. What you're saying, in effect, is that even though there's very restrictive gun laws, they don't matter in the hands of a madman. I mean, guns don't fire themselves. And unfortunately, I think what we need to ban is turning a blind eye on the mental health crisis that we have in this country. That's what really needs to be banned. Bans don't work. When I purchased my guns, I went in the state of Virginia. I was checked instantly, as instant background checks are available in Virginia, and I was given a gun. And I've never thought in my mind, I'm going to go solve my problem with a gun. I don't think you would. I would shoot a gun with you in a gun range.
But my point is that you have so many of these flashpoints now in America. There was a story yesterday of a neighbor who shot down and killed 2 of his neighbors with a gun because their dog messed on his porch. And this is the kind of story that I see. I follow this account on Twitter called @GunDeath. It reports every shooting in America as it gets reported. It's terrifying. The kind of just indiscriminate slaughter of Americans on a daily basis, on average 35 a day. And here's the thing I would put to you. You would accept, would you not, that if your brother had not gone out armed with a gun that day, then Trayvon Martin would be celebrating his 18th birthday today. He'd be alive.
No, I wouldn't accept that, Piers, because tens of millions of Americans own guns, and many of them throughout America are required to conceal their weapons. So that means that when you have a concealed carry permit, if you don't live in an open carry state, for example, Florida is not an open carry state, you're required to conceal your gun. Now, we're not going to have time in this segment
to get into every
statistic.
But you're not required to carry one, are you? That's my point.
When you do carry a gun, you're required to conceal it.
Yes, but I understand that. But it's chicken and the egg. My point is, if George had not been carrying a gun that night, Trayvon Martin would be celebrating his 18th birthday with his family today. And Trayvon Martin, to remind you, had simply gone up to the store to buy a packet of Skittles and then go back to see his dad. Now, my question to you again is, if your brother had not gone out with a gun that night, you must surely accept that Trayvon Martin would still be alive.
You know, there's no telling what would have happened. We don't know if we would have been commemorating shortly the one-year anniversary that George was another statistic, another person killed at the hands of his attacker. You know, you can only slam someone's head violently into the concrete so many times. You can only break someone's nose and sit on them for so long while they're screaming for help for over a minute before that person has to take some kind of action to save their life.
Yeah, but again, slightly missing the point, because of course it was your brother was pursuing Trayvon, right? So obviously Trayvon was trying just to go home to see his father. And the point, I guess,
I think it's a shame that you repeat that, and also Jonathan Capehart and other journalists like Charles M. Blow. The narrative that you purport relies on this line of was pursuing, and it is in fact not consistent with evidence that George was pursuing. What is consistent, and what you did the first time I was on your air, was you cut off his phone call when he said, "Okay, we don't need you to do that, okay." What that means is when someone says, "Okay, he ran and I can't see him," that means that that person's gone from their sight. That means that the pursuit or alleged pursuit is over at that point.
Well, look,
and if you really want to...
Here's the thing, Robert. All this will emerge now in the trial. We know that. And I'm very aware it's a very complicated situation. But clearly we can only go on what we have heard in the public domain, where your brother is clearly told to not follow and clearly ends up following. So we will find...
No, that's absolutely, that's a falsehood, and it's absolutely not true.
Okay,
what you should understand and be apprised of are the actual facts. When you say you understand, that implies that you were there somehow.
Well,
and you're starting to sound like Torre when he came on to you and said...
With respect, though...
You're not apprised of the facts.
With respect, though, Robert, you weren't there either.
With respect, I'm sorry about the delay. But what I've said is that evidence has not contradicted the statements of George, not the statements he made to the police or the statements he made to his family.
Robert, you were not there either,
irresponsible.
were you?
No, I wasn't there either, but I know the person telling the story better than you do.
Okay, well, you're putting your brother's side, and I totally accept that's what a brother would do. But neither of us were there, and we will find out, hopefully, at the end of this trial.
And that's precisely
exactly
why it's
happened.
irresponsible to assert that, in fact, the pursuit continued.
Well,
that's precisely why.
I understand that, but of course, it's equally unfair of you to presume the opposite. So we both, in the end, will have a view about this. We will see what happens. But
sure.
I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thanks for having me again, Piers.
It is a complicated case, and we now know there will be a court hearing in June, and hopefully we'll find out the answers.